So today we have Bal K Joshi, who is chairman of MacNet. Thanks a lot, Bal, for accepting our invitation to share your insight and expertise on this platform. There is a very interesting story about Bal that I think he's the only person in the world who started a digital platform to sell goats, and today he's created one of the most awesome solution, a platform which moves money digitally across the globe using API, and they proudly call it operating system for payments. So Bal, thanks a lot. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more? Because I've tried to be a little bit, I'll say that short. We would like to hear from the horse's mouth.
Thank you, Deepak. Actually, thank you, Deepak, for reaching out to me. And currently, I'm based out of US. Currently I'm based out of Kathmandu, Nepal. Building this really interesting company that basically builds open API platforms to move money from US to globally. So it started as, like you said, as a platform for migrant workers, primarily in the US and other developing countries, to send goats and other gifts back home in the country. And then eventually it just kind of took its own turns. You know, the people who were selling goats wanted to send money and didn't realize that I was getting into one of the most interesting businesses in the world. So today in Nepal, we're moving over 15% of money that moves from US to Nepal. And at the same time, the model that we introduced in Nepal has received a lot of attention. And so in fact, right now we are about to go live in 10 plus countries in next 4 months. And so I'm very excited about this whole new way of connecting the world together. So, and the most exciting part is being able to do that, all that from Kathmandu, Nepal.
Great. So let me start with the first question. So COVID is the hottest topic. We all know that actually the world is suffering because of that. And COVID will not be only having the health impact, but will also have a lot of impact on the economies across the globe. From US, which is a developed country, to developing country like Nepal, India, we are seeing that a lot of disruption is happening. So my first question is that what impact do you see on the startup ecosystem due to COVID and subsequent economic downturn? Because if we see that Nepal is a very young country with a median age of close to 21.8 years, that creates a lot of aspirations for the youngsters. Secondly, you'll also see that actually like Nepal 6 to 7 years back was not doing that great when it comes to innovation. Ranked at 128, the last in the Global Innovation Index. Over next 5 to 6 years, you have achieved a lot and becoming 108. But because of COVID, do you see that stagnating? So I would like to understand your perspective about how the COVID would be impacting startup ecosystem of Nepal.
So in Nepal, actually, it's taken a completely different turn, right? So by the blessings of all the gods of Kathmandu, and I'd say primarily Pashupatinath and Swayambhu, somehow we have kind of dodged the bullet. So far, we have over only 31 infections and 0 mortality, right? But the country has done an excellent job in terms of maintaining the, lockdown, and thanks to the government for that. So that's one thing that they've done very well. So, however, during this lockdown, so whatever's happened is, so I played a pretty interesting role in kind of introducing tech-based business here in Nepal. So I started my company Tamil.com, the famous or the infamous goat selling company, back in 1998. So that's when I started my company. So when I started my company back then, everyone thought I was pretty much crazy. So the whole idea of doing business online was just basically a fool's game. But in the last 25 days, the adoption of technology here in Nepal has completely changed. So government has actually eased off a lot of food deliveries and grocery deliveries companies to operate with special permission. So suddenly now there's a boom of people who's now trying to figure out this whole e-commerce game, right? So one thing it's also been clear here is basically the especially with the the young basically generation that we have, and is the startup ecosystem is very much focused on the tech side. Right. So on that note, so actually it's going to positively impact the startup ecosystem. So suddenly in the last 4 or 5 days, I have received so many calls from extremely large business houses here in Nepal, who's always done businesses, like their great grandfathers did. Like they're all brick and mortar guys. I've received a lot of calls from private equity firms. I've received a lot of calls from financial institutions saying, you know what, so you've done this long, so how do you see us playing roles? So in fact, in this time, I have been spending most of my time kind of identifying companies that needs funding, and then building the right ecosystems that were missing. So excuse me, I do see this a whole transformation of Nepal into going into digital because of COVID, and then on top of that excuse me, on top of that, like we are a very remittance centered nation. And I'd say over 95% of the money that comes into Nepal is through physical platform. And guess what? They're all off now. So there's been a lot of understanding in terms of all the gaps, all the bridges, all the digital bridges that Nepal as as a business community or the financial institutions as infrastructure have ignored. So next thing that's going to happen right after COVID is there's going to be a lot of opportunities for startup guys to provide to provide digital-based solutions to the government and to the private sector and definitely to the financial institutions. So definitely a very positive opportunity for people here in Nepal.
Awesome. Great to know that actually, the COVID is catalyzing the startup ecosystem in Nepal, and you always, as being a torchbearer of startup ecosystem in Nepal, have been contributing tremendously for that. Congratulations for you on for that. So that's bringing us to our next question. So what in your view is going to be impact of COVID overall business globally, specifically in your domain? So you are one of the topmost companies in moving money, specifically for those who are actually expatriates, right? So there is a lot of migrants out of Nepal across the world, as well as you're also serving some advanced economy like US when it comes to remittance. So I would like to understand your perspective about that, how COVID is going to impact your domain, specifically in your country. At the same time, also a little bit of global perspective of the business you are in.
Okay. So Deepak, to be very honest with you, right? The first week of lockdown, I almost have a heart attack, and knowing, how many people we have on the payroll, and then just not knowing what's going to happen next, And the week after, then what happened was money started flowing. And what we quickly realized was actually right now, week after and today, what we've seen is the number of transactions that we're cranking through our system has not decreased, but the ticket size, per transaction has decreased. But the new customer acquisition of the people now sending money digitally has increased significantly. So all in all, in terms of volume, we're down 30%. So in terms of transactions, we are actually, as of this week, we've started actually growing.
Great.
So that's in my case. So I'm probably the only one in the country that's moving money digitally on both the send side and the receive side, So in fact, a lot of digital companies, the digital incumbents like TransferWise, Remitly, or World Remit, or even Zoom. So they're having problem dispersing payments into Nepal right now. Why? Because the bank's treasury are open for only limited time, right? So two scenarios. The cash is pretty much blocked. So there's no cash moving at all. Digitals who don't have, digital players like these companies that I mentioned, who do not have local agents. Now they are operational, but the thing is, you really don't know when the money is actually moving. And on top of that, somebody like us who are locally based and kind of initiating debit and credit instructions from Nepal, we are 120% fully functional, right? So what I see is definitely in my side, right? So digital transformation of the remittance industry is now going to increase 100 miles an hour, right? On the overall, we will definitely see a decline in basically the volume, that generates from the US, which is right now about $148 billion a year. But the digital is going to increase because I think even the people who are, sending money through offline platforms now are going to be forced to now basically send money digitally. So during this time, so one of the things that we did was we took Armenia live. So we took US to Armenia corridor live approximately maybe 15 days ago, and it was so beautiful to see. Basically, people started using the platform, and from day one they had transactions, and now they are increasing on a pretty. They're increasing transactions pretty swiftly, right? So in this whole sector, what I see is the volume is definitely going to decrease. And digital is definitely the platform that the financial institutions that will have to adopt to provide the service. And then what I also see is the hyper-localization of this whole fintech industry. So what we learned from these incumbents was like, even though it doesn't matter if you're a multi-billion-dollar company like TransferWise, but if you don't have a hyper-local, angle to it, you're pretty much stuck not being able to move money. In fact, I'll be very honest with you. If you look at Remitly's website, so if you want to do some, limit upgrade, it can take up to 3 to 4 weeks right now. Why? They just don't have the bandwidth. So unfortunately, there's a lot of people who's not been able to come to the office. There's a resource constraints. On top of that, corresponding bankings are on and off. So these are the issues that we're dealing with. So right now, after the first week where I almost had the mental breakdown, so my job has been able to see, all right, what is the future of digital remittance? Right? What is the future of digital remittance? So one thing that came to my mind after doing whatever the hell I have done, in my entire career, which I've dedicated to understanding the cross-border payments from, outside of the US, is like, I think the future is going to be establishment of digital agents of money services businesses, right? So what does that mean, right? So it means the whole physical agent network going digital. So so in terms of ecosystem, in terms of the, how the business is going to flow, it's no different than a guy in a store accepting payments, accepting cash for Western Union. So how do you build the same ecosystem digitally? So that is exactly what I am doing right now. And then the biggest realization was Tamil Remit, the goat selling company, now moving money. It is probably one of the world's first digital agent of a MSB, money service businesses in the US. So I never realized that, before COVID. After COVID, I was like, oh my goodness, so I have something really interesting here in place. So how do I use all of these experimentations and scale? So that's exactly what I'm doing right now.
Awesome. Great to know the great work McNet and Tamil is doing. That brings us to our third question. If in a very short 2 lines, if you have to explain how you and your organization has changed due to COVID and what you have been doing to become a better version of your own self in this difficult time.
Very interesting question. So right now we're continuously figuring out, right? And I think us as an organization, right, working remotely has always been part of our culture. So it didn't really take us, long to kind of adapt that. So one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest efforts that we're putting in right now is how do we manage our customers who are primarily in the US, right? How do we even console them, emotionally to make sure that they have a voice to hear here in Nepal, which is us. And the other one is, like, most of the people that run my organizations are extremely young. So the average age of people that work in this organization is around 23 and a half, right? So trying to keep them motivated and trying to make sure that they are not having a breakdown, so that's been one of my biggest challenges. And that's basically, as an organization, we're trying to figure out digitally how to, hold our meetings, how to basically do our stand-ups, how to do our routine, like scheduled events, digitally, so that they are equally inspired and not demotivated. So that's been actually one of the biggest challenges that we're having. So, and as an organization, on the other side, what we've realized is we have never received as many as business queries as we have had in the past 15 days. And we have been actually closing deals in the past 15 days.
That's cool.
And so what we're saying is like, oh my goodness, what have we got ourselves into? In a day when the whole world is empty and have dead, we are in business, right? So then realize like, oh my goodness. So what is the responsibility that we have being a company, being a US company based out of Nepal, trying to move money. And then the biggest lesson that I've learned is, oh my goodness, the responsibility, the magnitude of responsibility now that we have to be able to help connect. It doesn't matter if it's in good times or the bad times. The role that we have the role that we have to basically perform. I never imagined that. On a last note, right? So we usually don't deliver cash at homes, right? So there was an instance where a daughter who was in California had to have, it was not a whole lot of money, it was $200, $300 that needed to be delivered. Our mom was pretty much done with her savings. She didn't have any helpers who could basically go into an ATM machine and collect cash. So literally, just called us to, say if we could deliver the money. So figured out a way to call the, home ministry, get a special permission to make sure that money was sent to her. Right? So this is just not about the business of moving money. This is not just about, creating another unicorn, hopefully another unicorn venture, right? So the responsibility that we have to make sure that we are there in good times and in bad times. So that, my friend, has completely changed the way I look at what I do. And then I'm more inspired to, make sure that, this whole effort continues to scale.
That's awesome. We need more people like you. You get inspired by serving your customer, going out of the way to help them, comfort them. That's really, I'm saying that awesome. That brings us to the last question for this discussion. If you have to tell one thing to the startup entrepreneurs they need to do to tide over these tough times, what would that one thing would be?
This tough time is not going away anytime soon. So you definitely have to be resourceful in terms of how you manage your costs. Working virtually, you have to perfect it. I think given that basically after your bank payments, rent, is going to be one of the hefty, like expenses on your balance sheet. So, I would hate to be my landlord right now, So, and I think, and more than anything else is collaborate. I think collaborate. I mean, I think every great company, every great idea has always come after these, like most horrific events, So here's an event that has challenged every philosophy that was there before. We're back to square one, right? So you have to continuously ask yourself, all right, what's in it for me for the next? Is it just only for me? Is it for my community, right? So I think in terms of business, not only just looking at the profit and loss side of things, the philosophy of what you do right now, is that going to prevent stuff like this in the future? And I think that's probably one of the biggest messages that I can share with your viewers right now.
Awesome. So that brings us towards the last part of this discussion we are having. Very, very interesting. I would love to keep on talking with you, but we have constraints of time. So if we have to think about out of the box, as per whatever we have discussed, other than that, if you would like to share anything other than that, please feel free to do that. So floor is you to come with whatever crazy stuff you like, just what you did initially, selling goats. Please talk about it and maybe inspire us, all of us.
So for me, I've dedicated my life, trying to figure out my own role, my responsibility, and my identity in a very globalized world. Born in Nepal, educated in the US, figure out to start a company in the US, then figure out a way to come back, be in Nepal and figure out to make money in US dollar, and at the same time be a global citizen. And in midst of this all, so this whole experimentation of selling goats or building this amazing fintech company, is a result. So when this happened, I was like, okay, my 20 years of hard work, did that actually go into drain? So my whole existence of being a very digital guy, which people, especially even my family, thought, what are you doing? One day you're selling gold, one day you're selling cakes, one day you're moving money. Are you, so I mean, but I kept going and I kept going and I kept going. And in the time, I connected with a lot of people who had very similar dreams like I did, to be able to exist digitally, to be, like a global digital citizen, So what I feel until we have vaccine, or even if we have vaccine, I think this event has completely changed how we were raised, our values are, and how our values are going to be. So for me personally, I'm going to continuously be focusing on being global digitally, but being physical locally. You know, so that's basically where I'm at. You know, and I think now, you know, I've got these two great companies kind of doing some amazing stuff. I have a very young team who's been taking the market globally. I'm not the CEO of the company. You know, I'm just the chairman. And so what I've realized for me going forward is I will be investing, which was not the case before the COVID. So I will be spending more time in, you know, setting up digital ecosystems here in Nepal, which actually I've started, and utilize my network, my experience to see if I can help transform lives of these amazing, you know, citizen that we have here. And unfortunately, a lot of people are going to be coming back from abroad, and these are all going to be very, very young people. So how do we create a platform? How do we create a network where we can make sure that basically these people are taken care of? So that's what I see. And then, so this is my fight. This is my, you know, destination. So let's see where it all goes.
Awesome, Bala. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and you are always as inspirational as possible. So all the interaction I had in past with you and this one has been always been very, very enlightening one. And I hope my audience also learn a lot from you, and try to adopt a lot of things you have talked today. And I would like to say that if somebody can believe in karma, it is you. So thanks a lot. Cheers. Stay safe, and look forward to meet you in Kathmandu soon. Thank you.
Soon, man. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right.
Take care.